The next question, someone asks whether we get lost in creative imaginings about the future, about what to say. I can still do that. In fact, I think that the rest of the question is, do you catch yourselves saying things to each other from a knee-jerk kind of egoic reaction?
Sure.
Or do you recognize the thoughts as they come up, see the nature of them, and let them go?
Yes.
That too. I would say that all minds are the same. They all have the same patterns, the same limitations, the same tendencies. The question is how much distance or space or acceptance is there around your mind, around your thoughts. And if there's a lot, if you're, I used that term a second ago, if you're holding them lightly, if you're just letting them come and go, and at times curious about them, but mostly just recognizing that you can hold them lightly. And if Gina or I do get triggered, we often very quickly shift back into kind of laughing at ourselves and saying, oh, or apologizing or whatever seems appropriate in response. Someone once asked me if I still get contracted, and I said, yeah, every day and many times a day. The difference is they just don't last. They don't.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
As soon as it happens, you recognize it, and then you're like, oh, that's the big difference. But yeah, sometimes, of course, sometimes something just pops out of your mouth that's habitual, and you catch yourself. But for the most part, there's not a lot of involvement with the egoic mind. The egoic mind also, as you evolve, it becomes more benign. So the kinds of things that go through my mind or his mind, they just aren't very poisonous. They aren't very negative. They aren't very strong. They aren't very believable. They're just seen most of the time as being just ridiculous, just ridiculously untrue. It's just so easy to see that they're untrue. And the question about imaginations, I absolutely don't think about the future because it's obviously a waste of time, so I don't really get pulled into that. But I want to say also that I'm pretty old, and thinking about the future and wanting things for the future is very much a part of when we're younger. I can't imagine being younger and not wondering what my future self is going to look like, be like, what's my life going to be like. It's already a known quantity for me pretty much, so I'm not like, oh, what's going to happen, or I wish something was going to happen or anything like that. I think it's one of the beautiful things about getting older is that there can be a certain freedom from all of the ego's dreams about my life and how it's going to turn out. When you're this old, you already know how it's going to turn out. It's kind of a known quantity. I could obsess about my death, my coming demise, right? But why would I want to do that? That wouldn't be very pleasant. I'll just wait and see what happens.
There's a great saying that it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Well, you could probably turn that around for those of you that aren't old. You could turn that around and say, you could start right now, just being more in the present, let the future take care of itself. Because thinking about it, it's just not particularly functional or helpful. And always a good question when you do get caught up in thoughts, and whether they're fantasies or worries or whatever, is to notice and then ask yourself, well, what else is true? And even more specifically, what else is true in this moment? What is here now? It's like a simple way of, a question like that redirects your attention away from the content of your mind and onto hopefully a bigger perspective, or even a more present moment kind of experience that is ultimately richer and more satisfying. Because thoughts about the future, they never really satisfy. I had a teacher years ago who used to say, you can never get enough of what doesn't satisfy. And so thoughts about the future definitely are that way. No matter how much you think about the future, you never have gotten enough. It's like empty calories for your mind. So.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to notice how no matter how good your life is, no matter what's going on, The mind's job is to come up with what's wrong, what's missing, how could it be better? And it's a shtick that it does. This is how it causes you to suffer. It's constantly, in every moment, coming up with what's wrong, what's missing, how could it be better? That is the source of unhappiness. So try to see what it's doing when you go into some thought about the future or some desire that you have. These desires that come from our mind, they are a part of that whole shtick of things could be better. If only you had this, you would be happy. The ego's always dangling, but this, and oh, if only that, and so-and-so's got this, and always dangling these things which just make you unhappy. And that is not what your life is about. Your life is what it is, and it will unfold as it will unfold. So try to catch how the mind is always doing that, even over really little things, really little things.
The way out of that experience, we said, bring your attention to the present moment. And paradoxically, the most quickest and most effective way to come back into the present moment is to get really curious about the experience of thinking like that. Rather than, saying, I shouldn't be thinking about the future, just really notice what it's like in your body, in your essence, in your, is it comfortable? Are you at ease? Do you feel a sense of peace and joy when you're caught in a lot of thoughts about the past or the future? And get really curious about the experience, because then it's sort of like then you really take in what we're saying, that it's not, in a sense, that it's not worth it. It's kind of like being really present to the food you eat can often shift the way you eat, because you start to really, and especially being really present to the effect that the food has on you. Decades ago, I basically gave up sugar because I started noticing how crappy I felt after I ate sugar. And it wasn't like a struggle to give it up.
You saw the whole truth.
I saw the whole truth of it. If someone held out a little pill and said, "Here, take this, it'll make you feel lousy and give you a headache."
But it'll taste good for 10 minutes.
Or not even that. Like a cookie, is like 30 seconds. But if you take the whole truth of what the effect is of that sweet food, then you might not eat it. And the same thing is actually true of your thoughts. If you really start being curious about the entire impact of your thoughts, then you'll notice that they don't grab you. They don't feel as compelling as they once did, just like cookies are no longer compelling for me.
Yeah, thinking about the future is actually very unsatisfying, and worse than that, it takes you out of your real life. It takes you out of the present moment. The importance of meditation and other spiritual practices is that it shows you the juiciness, the sweetness of real life when you're fully present. So it's hard to take in these teachings if you haven't experienced what life can be like when you're very present. If you can go deeply into presence, which spiritual practices and meditation teaches you, then you begin to experience life in a much deeper, richer, satisfying way than your mind can ever do for you. That's a big part of the spiritual path. It's not enough to say no to the mind if you're not staying in the moment and going more deeply into presence so that you really want to be there. Most people haven't experienced the brightness, the joy, the aliveness, the beauty that life is when you are fully present to it. But it's important that we do experience that so that we want to stay present and not go back to the mind, because the mind is enticing. We're addicted to it. It's the default. So in order to get beyond that default, we have to stay in the present moment long enough to experience the beauty of it. If you don't experience the beauty of it, of course you're going to stay in your mind, no matter how many teachings you hear about detaching from the mind. So both things are necessary. You have to see through the mind, and you have to spend some time in the present moment in a deep enough way that you experience the value of doing that. That there is a whole nother way of being in life that is possible. And that's what we're really teaching. We're not just teaching you to not pay attention to your mind. That isn't enough if you're not going to go deeply into this other way of being, which is a quietness and openness to what is in the present moment, and a listening to the intuitions, the inspiration, the drives, the motivation that are arising in you, in everyone, in every moment, to move you in your life. That is the divine self. The divine self is here, and it wants to move you in your life. And it will, if you give it a chance.